part one, I want to talk about why muscles don't always cause pain, and in some respects try and describe the real cause of low back pain. It's kind of where the buck stops. Now, there are different ones, different real causes, if you will. And I'm going to use the example of sciatica because there are different causes, or there are different tissues that can create the pain, but all of the symptoms are very similar in that pain will go into the buttocks and down the leg. They could just go to the buttocks, they could just go to the knee, they could go all the way down to the ankle and the foot. So that's sort of the first thing that we need to understand, is that the symptoms are very similar, but the tissue could be different, and then we can further talk about the cause. So if we start with the first one, which is a disc bulge. So a disc bulge can give you sciatic symptoms, i.e. symptoms that come from the sciatic nerve. So the bulge touches the nerve, it irritates it, and then the irritation goes down the leg. Now the disc bulge, that could take, depending on who you read and where you read, that could take 2 to 8 weeks to resolve itself, for the pain to reduce. So what will happen is the bulge will sort of go back into the disc, if you will. But what we have to look at is, how did the disc get to that situation in the first place, and what's happening to the disc? So when a bulge occurs, it's not, as a general rule, it's generally not down to one moment. So that moment when the back went, or you had that episode of pain, it wasn't just that moment that did it. It was a build-up. It has been described as the straw that broke the camel's back. So there is I'm going to describe it as a fatiguing of tissues, if you will. Now, we're talking about the disc. So if you can imagine, that's an intervertebral disc. You're looking down at the top of it. So you've got a gel-like fluid in the middle, and then you've got, I guess, a bit like rings of a tree around it. Now, what the idea of those two tissues is, you get flexibility from the gel-like fluid, but you get the rigidity of the rings. So you've got a tissue that is able to be flexible and strong. That's the purpose of those two tissues. Now, how the disc bulge occurs is the gel-like fluid in the middle migrates its way through the rings of the disc, or the rings of the tree. Now, how does it do that? Well, it's done via a process described as delamination. So the rings are very tightly packed together, or they are sort of optimized, if you will. They're not too tightly packed together, but they're not too loose. Because if they were too tight, they'd be too rigid. If they were too loose, they'd be too flexible. Now, the delamination basically creates more space, and it allows the fluid to migrate. So this is the fatiguing process. It's the migration of it. So the fluid migrates, or not the fluid, the gel-like material migrates its way through the layers, and then eventually it bulges. Now, what does that? So I guess you could say this is sort of one of the real causes of low back pain. Well, it's a flexion and extension cycle, and the repeated flexion extension cycle. And it's sped up under load. So the more load you put on, so if you keep bending the spine back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, the more you do that, the more this delamination process will occur. And then what will then start to happen is the fluid will migrate. If you then add load on top of that, then the process will happen that bit quicker. So one of the causes is sort of flexion extension cycles, which fatigue the fibrous material and allows the gel-like fluid to sort of go through. Now, as I've mentioned, another sort of real cause would be a genetic one. Now, I don't like to put too much emphasis on genetics because it's very hard to know someone's genetics as to that was the cause. It was your genetics that caused it. But it is a real thing. And it's all to do with, it's all to do with a part of the genetic makeup. One is the disc shape. The other is the amount of collagen that's within the disc. So some people will have more collagen, which will slow the process. Some people will have less collagen, which will speed the process up, if that makes sense. But until you actually look at the disc and identify that genetics was the cause, it's very hard to say it was the cause. So it's much more relevant to talk about the use of the spine as the real cause, although genetics do play their part. So there is a genetic element and an epigenetic element, let's say. Now, I've said that depending on who you listen to or who you read or where you get your information, people will say 2 to 8 weeks and the bulge will resolve itself. So it will sort of, the fluid will sort of push back in. But now there is an inherent weakness because the fibres haven't gone back to the way they were. That's not essentially how they work. So they're not going to go back to sort of the default prior to the first bulge. So what happens, or what can happen now, is, and let's just say that was at L5, L4. So you've got the base of the spine, which is S1, L5. Then you've got the L5 disc, and then you've got the intervertebral disc, L5, L4, with L4 sat on the top. So let's just say it was at L4, L5 vertebra. So you've got one disc below, and obviously you've got many up above. And let's just say the one below is fine, and the one above is fine. So these two discs, above and below, have their integrity. So they are as plump as they were before. But the one in between isn't as plump because the disc bulge has happened and the delamination of the fibres has occurred. So what you now have is an inherent instability in that segment because of that disc, because of those movements or genetics that created the disc to be that way. So the real cause of the disc being that way was the loaded movement or the cycles of loaded movement that build up over time and then eventually give you the disc bulge. You also have the genetic element factor to it as well, which I'm not going to ignore. But what happens is this disc now is not as stable as the one above it and the one below it. So between the L4 and the L5 disc, it can now move a lot more because the disc isn't as plump and it doesn't have the rigidity to it. So now there is this inherent instability. So this is where we can start talking about muscle weakness. So the muscles are responding to that instability in the disc. So it is not the muscles that are inherently weak. It is not the muscles that are inherently the problem. They are trying to deal with a situation which has been created. So they may become tight. They may sort of lock into position. So there may be a lot of tension in there. So you may not be able to move it very far, and you may not be able to get a lot of sort of extra contraction out of it. So we have to understand the muscles from that perspective. They aren't driving the problem. It's something to do with the spine. Now, they can become tight for other reasons, and I want to go through two more types of injury that can cause sciatic pain. So we've got foraminal stenosis, and that is basically the narrowing of the hole that the nerve comes through. So if that narrows because bone gets laid down, it's going to be much quicker to irritate the nerve because the hole isn't. So as you move your spine, as you bend down and pick something up, as you extend up to lift over your head, because the hole isn't as wide, it's going to irritate. It's going to be quicker to irritate. Now, there is no real healing of this. With regards to the disc, as we've said, that can sort of 2 to 8 weeks, that can resolve itself. It doesn't mean the disc is healed, but it means that the pain has resolved itself. The fluid has gone back in. With regards to the stenosis, and these can be arthritic changes to the bone. So again, it's like it's a wear and tear to it, which it can be a natural part of aging. But that natural part of aging can be sped up with the improper use of the spine. And that, again, that's a multi-dimensional, multifactorial answer as well. But I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole because I've been talking long enough on this. There is no real sort of solution to the stenosis apart from management. There is also facet joint arthrosis, which is a similar thing. It's a wear and tear. It's an improper use of the spine. That again, the facet joints, if you can imagine, you've got the barrel of the disc, the barrel of the vertebra, and then you've got the 3 sort of prongs that one comes straight off the back and then 2 sort of come diagonally out the side. Those are known as the spinous process out the back and the 2 transverse processes out the side. Between those transverse processes, there is a joint which allows them to slide over each other as you flex and extend the spine and rotate and things like that. So if those joints become inflamed, they can have then arthritic changes, then you get your facet joint arthrosis. Again, there is no real sort of healing for that. You can obviously have surgery to open the hole out for the stenosis, and you can have the surgery on the facet joints as well. Obviously, that's not ideal. That's not what a lot of people go for, but pain can be managed, and in some respects, pain can be resolved. It just means, which I'll talk about in the final part, but I want to get back to the muscles, which I'm going to talk about in part 2. But this is just building some building blocks, because as that healing or resolving of pain is taking place, muscles are changing how they manage the stability of the spine. Because there is, when you look at S1, L5, L4, L3, L2, L1, there's no bony structures to hold it in place. So the muscles have to do that job of holding it in place. So if there is a perceived problem or a perceived instability at any of those segments, S1, L5, L5, L4, L4, L3, so on and so forth, the body will try and manage that. And it will use tightness to be able to do that. Now, there will be a degree of what's called muscle guarding. So a lot of the problem has resolved itself, but the muscles are still holding on tight. But as I've mentioned, if there is an inherent instability in the spine because the disc has become a little bit more lax and it's not as plump as the one above it and below it, it will hold that segment tight because you have the QL muscle that joins L5, L4, L3, L2, L1. You've got the psoas muscle which joins onto L5, L4, L3, L2, L1, T12 and into the diaphragm. So they are muscles directly stabilizing the vertebra. So they will become, or they can become, tight. And that's not because they're tight, that's because they're responding to a problem. So what I'm saying is muscle tightness and muscle weakness is a symptom of a problem at the spine. If we can manage the problem at the spine and create more stability through the muscles for the spine, then we can start solving the problem. Now, what I'm going to talk about more is I've started to build a picture of why weakness is just a symptom. What I'm going to do now in part number 2 is talk a little bit more about weakness as the symptom, and I'm going to talk more directly about the muscles that are, or what's happening within the muscles. And there's 2 components of the muscles that we're going to talk about that will, again, hopefully help you understand why weakness isn't a symptom of low back pain.